So let's talk about what's actually happening in Iran. On February 28th, 2026, the world watched as the United States and Israel launched a massive military strike. Now, this wasn't some sudden escalation that came out of nowhere. It was really the culmination of 70 years of history and a story of frantic last-minute diplomacy that failed just hours before the first missiles fell. In this explainer, we're going to unpack how we got to this point and what it really means for all of us.
What makes this so jarring is that just one day earlier, on February 27th, the world got this incredible message of hope. After weeks of really intense negotiations, it seemed like a historic agreement to de-escalate Iran's nuclear program was right around the corner. It honestly felt like a major breakthrough was about to happen. But that hope was just shattered. Less than 24 hours after peace was declared within reach, the first strikes landed. So what on earth happened in that critical window? How did we go from the very brink of a deal to the brink of a massive war?
Well, to answer that, we really need to dig into the paradox of February 2026, where a potential deal somehow gave way to a devastating strike with, just breathtaking speed. Okay, so the coordinated assault was massive. Codenamed Operation Epic Fury by the US and Roaring Lion by Israel, these strikes hit military, intelligence, and nuclear sites all across Iran's major cities. The stated goal from the White House was completely unambiguous: regime change. And in that initial attack, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who had ruled for 36 years, was killed.
But a conflict like this doesn't just erupt out of a vacuum. It's deeply rooted in 70 years of mistrust between the US and Iran, a story that's really defined by a few critical turning points. It really starts all the way back in 1953, with a CIA-backed coup that overthrew Iran's democratically elected leader. Fast forward to 1979, you have the Islamic Revolution, the US hostage crisis, and the complete severing of diplomatic ties. And then, much more recently, in 2018, the US withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal pretty much set the stage for the crisis we're seeing today.
At the very heart of this decades-long conflict lies one single issue: Iran's nuclear program. It's the technical flashpoint that has led to sanctions, to negotiations, and now to war. So at the core of this whole nuclear issue is something called uranium enrichment. And in simple terms, it's just the process of refining natural uranium to increase the concentration of a specific isotope, U-235. If you enrich it to a low level, you can fuel a power plant. If you enrich it to a very, very high level, that's what you need for a bomb. So look at this. That 2015 nuclear deal capped Iran's enrichment at 3.67%, which is perfectly fine for nuclear power. But after the US pulled out of the deal, Iran escalated its program in a big way, reaching 60% enrichment. Now, that level has absolutely no civilian use, and it's just a short technical step away from the 90% needed for a weapon.
But here's a really crucial distinction. Despite having the capability to produce bomb-grade material, US intelligence consistently assessed that Iran had not decided to actually build a weapon. This difference between having the capability and making the decision was right at the center of the debate leading up to these strikes. As you can imagine, the strikes triggered a rapid and incredibly wide-ranging retaliation from Iran. The consequences were immediate, and they were global, creating a new and really dangerous phase of this conflict. The scale of this exchange was just unprecedented. By March 1st, the US and Israel had hit nearly 2,000 targets inside Iran. Iran's response? A massive barrage of over 2,500 missiles and drones in just 4 days, and they targeted 9 different countries across the Middle East. This kind of regional escalation has immediate global consequences. And why? Because of this number. Roughly 20% of the entire world's oil supply passes right through the Strait of Hormuz, just off the coast of Iran. That vital artery of the global economy is now smack in the middle of a conflict zone. And the wider cost has been absolutely devastating. The human toll is already mounting, with over 1,300 killed in Iran and dozens of casualties across the region. Economically, oil prices spiked almost immediately. Logistically, major travel hubs like Dubai had to shut down. And for civilians in Tehran, the conflict meant empty supermarket shelves and a desperate search for essentials. So the big question is, where does this conflict go from here? Right now, analysts are looking at 3 main potential scenarios.
Okay, so the best case scenario is a contained conflict that de-escalates pretty quickly.
A more likely path, though, is a prolonged conflict, a sort of war of attrition that could drag on for months. And the most dangerous scenario, of course, is an all-out regional war, which would threaten to disrupt global trade and energy supplies on a massive, massive scale. And so we're left with this just tragic question. Was this conflict an inevitable clash, something 70 years in the making that was always going to happen? Or was it a preventable war, lost in those 24 hours between a promise of peace and the very first shot fired?